are back. You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and joining me once again, Mr. Kevin Durso. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well, and just right off the top here, first and foremost, happy birthday, sir.
Thank you.
Yep, and I'm not going to belabor this. We'll move on. So, did want to mention right off the top of the show, once again, I did it last week. We are premiering episodes on our YouTube channel, Sundays, 8 o'clock. We're trying to do that, to tell your friends.
Anyways, no time getting into the fact that I'm past my prime.
Well, you know.
From player standpoint.
30 is the new 25? Listen, we'll take it.
I just know that to be the age that for players' careers, the back nine starts.
That's fair.
You know,
but as a reporter,
I don't. Yeah, right. Well, sure. I hopefully have many years ahead in
decades.
That area, and certainly I don't feel that way. You know, I don't feel
that's good
the way that the number is supposed to make you feel. I don't feel 30. So.
Well, that's good to hear. Young at heart.
I woke up feeling good. So
this team hasn't aged you decades?
Oh, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, you know, let's just look. The gray hair thing runs in my family anyway, so that's an inevitability for me. But I feel like they're coming in faster over the last couple of years. I'll tell you that much.
Man, how about over the last couple of weeks? The Flyers.
In all seriousness, when you watch somebody in a high ranking position in general, and I don't want whether it's a president, whether it's somebody who
the
runs
aging
a
is
team,
incredible.
The amount of aging that they do in a span of so many years because of the stresses of what you're doing is just crazy. And
yeah, it's wild.
I think I made that comment the other day, not from my standpoint, but I even said I talked about how I'm Claude Giroux looks like the oldest 34-year-old on the planet because not in the sense that he can't play. We know he can play. He actually he made a ridiculously smart play in Saturday's game for what it's worth. But he sits down to go and talk, and you can almost see the age on his face, the wear on his face.
The man has seen some stuff.
Yeah,
They're hard miles on Claude Giroux, and part of those hard miles include setting a franchise record this week. Are we ready to dive into the team?
Are we going to dive into the team, or should we just get to this is a third week in a row I'm going to say this. Just get to the big story today is the Action News line. Are we just going to get into the big story, which was not even really the games, but the press conference? I mean, we can do either or. I mean, let's put it this way. Here's what we can say. This one happened first.
Yeah, let's touch on that.
Technically, for what it's worth, the press conference was announced Monday morning.
Right.
Roughly. It was very well documented, somewhere in the range of, because I'm trying to remember their timeline completely in my head here for a minute. They had played, we did our show, they had played last Saturday, I believe.
Right.
And had lost again, obviously.
Yeah.
So by that point, they came into our recording of last week's show. That would have been 11. That
was 11.
Yeah. Believe me, they start to blend together. At one point in time, I wrote the preview and wrote that they had already lost 14.
Oh no!
In the beginning, I corrected it before I got there, but I started to type 14 because they do start to blend together.
Yep.
So they had just that's right because they had just lost to Buffalo, and the only positive that we took away from the thing, at least that I did, was hey, the thing started at 1:00 that day, so you had all afternoon to just jump it out stuff because
right.
I think we had even talked about and we did this Sunday morning, by the way, last week. So we didn't even know what kind, or at least I didn't, what kind of day of football was ahead on Sunday afternoon. But Saturday night, watching football after watching the Flyers lose for the 11th straight time. Or was that, no, that was 10. I'm sorry. Right? No, it was
Buffalo was 11.
That's right. Okay. Now I'm getting confused.
They picked up 12 and 13 on Monday and Tuesday to set the franchise record.
Okay. I'm all over the place with it. Yep. And, we're using too many numbers at the start of the show. We already hit with the 30 number, and now we're hitting with numbers that keep going, that for the longest time kept going up. Because the thing with Saturday was that they had a shot to do something. And I don't look, I'm sure somebody out there would have had the numbers ready to go, but they had a shot to do something on Saturday that I don't recall ever being done in recent memory for sure. I mean, let's just say it was already a franchise record losing streak. So I don't know if they've ever gone winless in a month, unless that month was, say, February, when they used to have like all-star breaks and Olympic breaks thrown in the middle. Like, if they only played 8 games in a month, yeah, maybe it's possible that they went a whole month without winning a game. But to say that they had
this would have been a real calendar month.
Well, to say that they had, I guess what would it have been? Because if they would have lost that game, the streak would have been 14, but that would have been 13 games in the month of January, because the streak technically started on December 30th.
Right.
So that would have been to have 13 games in the middle of, like, in an entire month, and to come out of it possibly without a single win.
It's impressive, and not in a good way.
Well, right, but you know, and how close did it come to being that? I mean, they're coming in on the final couple minutes. They have the lead. They've had the lead the entire time, pretty much from what, 7 minutes, 8 minutes into the game,
early on,
until we're into the final minute of regulation. And you could just see it. You could just see it coming, like this. You know, the pressure's on. You can feel LA making their push. LA's not a bad team. They're like, I wouldn't call them great, but they're okay. They're on the rise.
They're doing all right in a bad Pacific Division.
And they're up and coming, because when you look at the number of young guys, I mean, like Kaliev had an assist. Quentin Byfield just scored his first goal a couple of nights ago prior to this game.
Almost got a second too.
Yeah, it did come pretty close a couple times. So, like, you sit there and you look at that. Like, they've got youth. Oh, you know who else had an outstanding game for LA that was all over the place? His name was mentioned I don't know how many times on that broadcast. Sean Dursey had an outstanding.
Sean Dursey did have an outstanding
game on Saturday. Like, he was really good.
Part of the Jake Muzzin to Toronto trade, I believe, or was it?
Nope, that was it. I believe, yeah. Because
it was either Muzzin or Campbell.
No, he was. I believe it was the Muzzin deal, because he was definitely originally a Toronto draft pick that was shipped out to LA. Because that was a whole big deal too, because he's from that area. He's from Toronto, or the Toronto area, so he was drafted by his hometown
and
team,
shipped out of town.
And then, look, you got to know that they're a team that's going to go for it on a regular basis. So it's not, that one wasn't a shock. But I guess the best thing we can start with is that, yes, even though this record was set, you got 3 close games. I mean, is that something to take away from? I mean, this could have ended all 3 times they played this week.
That's fair. Yeah.
Like, that opportunity was there all 3 times this week. They played Dallas on Monday. You got a 1-1 game. Get into the later stages. You're starting to think about overtime, because you're down to under 5 to go. So you're starting to think about overtime. And it was, I forget exactly how much time was left, but it was down to under 4 for sure. It was about 3 something left maybe. And I'll tell you what, I know that in the moment, most people didn't know it went in the net, that shot from Jacob Peterson.
Yep.
I was not, full disclosure, I said this to you before we started recording. I did not make it to the game on Saturday to cover, which is probably the reason.
Understandable.
Which is probably the reason why they won the game. But, you know, all things considered. But my vantage point up in the press box on Monday night, specifically, that I knew it was in. I could see it. I had it on like right off the bat.
Fair enough.
And the officials blew play dead pretty much immediately, so it wasn't like they had to reset the clock by too much. I think they reset it to something like 3:25.
Right.
Which was only adding like 4 seconds. But so credit to them, I guess, for also stopping play really quickly after, like, to realize, hey, we think there might be.
One of them goes, "Was that in?" And the others go, "Yeah, I think it was."
Well,
okay, let's call it.
Somebody on Dallas celebrated like it was in, and I was sitting up there going, I think you got to stop. I think that went in. I'm pretty sure that went in, because it looked weird. Something didn't look right.
Right.
To keep this thing going. So I'm like, that looked like it was.
It looked
in.
Yeah.
And
sure.
and it was, and
clearly,
you know, and we were just talking about this before we started, like, goals like that when you're in the middle of a streak like that, especially when you're tied in a game,
they're backbreakers.
It just, you know immediately it's over.
Yep.
Like, the game is probably like that. There's no coming back from that one. Not at
this
that stage
team
of the game.
This team isn't overcoming that. It's just not happening.
So they lose to Dallas. I mean, and there was an empty netter added on.
Sure.
I believe Joe Pavelski
It was Joe
had
Pavelski.
that empty netter,
Yep.
which by the way, he's the type of guy, like he's one of these guys right now that I look at for a team like that. And Dallas isn't a great team either by any stretch of the imagination. Dallas played on Friday night, I believe, this past week, where they had their big, ceremony for the year. So Sergei Zubov gets his number retired. They're playing Washington, and Washington proceeds to drop like 4 on Braden Holtby in the first period.
Them. Yeah.
Like Braden Holtby did not have a good night against his former team in any way, shape, or form. Either way, so they're not a great team, but like you look and you sit there and go, Joe Pavelski's their leading scorer, probably going to get some buzz for the deadline, like good buzz, because he's got that veteran presence and can help a team. Like it's pretty impressive to watch him at his age still do it. Like he's up there now too, where his career is starting to wind down. That era of San Jose guys who were part of that core group that got to the final and all that stuff. Like,
man, I don't know if Dallas is sellers at the deadline. By the way,
they might not be because
they're 2 points out of the playoff race.
Right, because of the path to the playoffs. You're probably right. Which is what makes, as we're going to talk about later, it's what makes Claude Giroux so much more valuable. It's because when you're a team that knows where to go with it, you're going to get, like, this is why I think people look and go, are you sure you're going to get as much as they think they're going to get from that deal? They might, because there's not going to be guys who are moved, because there's going to be enough teams to say we got a shot.
Colorado's looking at a Stanley Cup. Like they are, and I don't know if they have the money or if they have the assets to make a significant trade, or if they're willing to move guys like an Alex Newhook or something like that.
You can help the money for a lot of teams with retention in this situation.
For sure, absolutely,
no doubt about that. Because
I don't think they're worried about the cash. I think they're worried about the cap space.
Well, I agree, but retention will help with that
for sure.
Like if you can cut that number in half, because it's only the last. What are we talking about?
20 games of it,
6 weeks of the season. Yeah, I think you can find a way to make it work a little bit. And for what it's worth, everything that I hear along the lines of this thing, it's going to involve somebody who's on an active NHL roster. It's not just going to be a futures deal here. It's going to involve something that helps you in the here and now a little bit, or at least that you are going to give a shot to see, like
something you can aggressively retool with.
Yeah, but like. Well, we'll get into all that later, but like, and I don't want to, because I don't want to sell it this short, because I think he's going to be worth more of a player than this particular guy. But it's a little bit like Wayne Simmons for Ryan Hartman, a little bit like you're going to get somebody back.
Right.
I think you're going to get better than Ryan Hartman, I would imagine, but you're not going to get,
you're not getting anybody fantastic.
You're not going to trade him to Colorado and magically make Cale Makar appear, right? Like, let's be real.
Or even, Gabe Landeskog. Like, that's not going to happen.
Right. Now, regardless, let's go back into these games for just a brief minute, because I don't want to spend too much time on the games that got them there or whatever. So that was Monday, and they score, it's over, that kind of deal. Not even the same thing, because there was never much of a lead involved when you're in a 1-1 game the whole way, right? And they did give up the first goal, by the way. So it wasn't until and the only goal that they scored, by the way, in the Dallas game
was a weird bounce.
They got a lucky bounce for Ivan Provorov to get a goal. Now you go to the Islander game, and this is the thing I love about this. The Islanders essentially spot them a 2-0 lead, not like at the beginning by fluke, because what was it? 50 seconds into the game, Claude Giroux scores from the goal line.
Yep.
So they get a goal like that. Then they get another goal because Justin Braun has one go off of Andy Green's skate.
Yep.
So it's 2-0.
Some weird ones in that game.
Now here's the thing. They had a game relatively recently, I think it was a San Jose game at home, where they were up 2-0, and I think the exact same thing happened, where it was about a minute later they give one back.
Okay.
Which is what makes you start thinking, like, if they carry 2-0, it's the first period of the game. If they carry 2-0 to the final couple minutes of the first period or into the second, you're thinking differently.
Absolutely.
The problem was that they gave up the goal, the first one, right after, like 50 seconds after.
Yep. It was a response goal.
So now Noah Dobson gets the Islanders on the board, and as you're sitting here watching that, like you're kind of just waiting for the moment. And I mean, what a play that Barzal makes to use his speed, creates a 2-on-1, sets up Anders Lee with a nice pass. There's a minute 45 seconds left in the first period, and you're back to square one, tie game. Like right off the bat. And this was one of the things that, look, I'm not going to sit here and act like we don't know what the team is on ice right now. Like, we get this. I still just do not get how a team can go out there and have a good start, like the 2-0, 8 shots on goal. The shot totals are 9-8 at the end of the first period. You're in a 2-2 game.
It's a competitive game.
You have lost 11 straight to that, or 12 straight to that point. So you're looking at the record is looking you in the face at this point, and you looked like you might avenge that with a 2-0 start, only to give it back. So now you're in a tie game. Everything's back on the table again, and for the rest of the seriously, the rest of the game, 9 shots.
Yep,
that's it. 9.
That's what a team playing on the back foot looks like.
Right. As you get dominated by a team like the Islanders, who are not very good in their own right, but and here was the funny thing. There were multiple times in that game that, despite the shot differential, despite the way that things were playing out, I thought it was going to be over that night to an extent, because 3-2 going into the third period, you're trailing. You think it might be over even then, because they're trailing into the third period. I mean, the momentum's on the Islanders side, clearly.
Right.
It's probably going to go that way. And then Jerry Mayhew scores. And you go, tie game. Oh, tie
okay,
game.
Then. Right.
And for the longest time, like, they were really still in that game because it's a tie game. And you're also sitting here thinking about the possibility of overtime again, because, and we'll get to this when they win a game, overtime presents opportunities in different ways. So with that much space on the ice, you're going, all it takes is one crazy mistake by the other side, and you've got an odd man rush, and you might score.
Yep.
And that could be the end of it. There's no rhyme or reason to why somebody wins or loses most of the time in overtime, because it's just
crazy.
Because it's just orchestrated chaos.
Yep.
That's what 3-on-3 is supposed to be. So to sit there and look at that and go, most of the third period, the 5 minutes that could be to come is going to slightly favor the Flyers, not in the sense that they might have a better shot of winning the game, but you go, at least as compared to their opponent, I'm saying, but in terms of, it's a free-for-all. Yep. So you don't know what you're going to get. If it gets to a shootout, I think I know who it favors. And if it,
the Flyers, spoiler alert.
And there's a lot of time left in regulation for it to go wrong, as we had seen the night before. All it takes is something with 2-3 minutes left, and it is still game over. The sad part was that it didn't happen with 2 or 3 minutes left. It happened with like 8, and it still was game over. And we knew it.
Because we've just watched this team over and over and over. They give up that goal, and they don't bounce back, and they just kind of fold. And we saw that over a lot of those 13 games, honestly. Saturday, we finally saw, them not do that, I guess. And there's really not a whole lot to talk about here, but I
will say one thing, and I came very close to jinxing it, I will say, because I did put this out there in the Twitterverse for a moment, because Cam Atkinson scored to give them to make it 2-0, and then that held on as, at least for a little while, that held on as the goal that was lined up to be the game winner, and then he scored again shorthanded. And one of the things I pointed out was, like, listen, I'm not going to try to sugarcoat a lot of things about this whole thing, and we're going to get right after we do this, we're going to get into the press conference, which is the bulk of the whole show. We're going to have to talk about, because that was the bigger story than anything else that happened on the ice this week. If there's been one player, last year we talked about Shane Gostisbehere like this. We would go, hey, listen, you know what? Whether you love him or hate him, his performance is good or bad, doesn't matter. What you're getting, he sits down in front of the media and he is telling it like it is. He's not shying away from just saying what he feels right now. And people loved the honesty. Like, people were disappointed when he got traded, not because of the fact that, like, oh, he's, what are you doing trading a player like that? That wasn't the issue. But people did love the fact that he was honest. People loved that.
He was a straight shooter.
And Cam Atkinson has probably been the most forthright and honest the entire losing streak.
Yep.
Just about how much it sucks, about how much, how difficult it is to get out of, about all sorts of things. And one of the few guys who you're sitting here going, what he's saying is not BS. He's not feeding you lines. Something, I'm not saying he doesn't throw a cliche or two in there every so often, but he's not feeding you a lie. He's really telling you honestly, down to he came out and said the thing several weeks ago now, I believe, but when he sat there and said something about, what, we give up a goal and the bench was deflated. I think it was the Columbus game.
Right.
Which was a couple weeks back. Give up a goal. Yeah, the bench was deflated from there, and we never really got it back. Good for you for saying it, because that's the type of stuff people want to hear. They don't want to hear, well, we were trying really hard and we ended up just coming up a little short. We're getting there. It's going to happen. And you might believe that. He might believe, it's going to happen at some point. But the guy who literally told it like it is, yeah, we get deflated. We know what the number, that's another one. We know the number. We know what the record is when we give up the first goal.
Right.
To say that too is important. And he basically almost single-handedly willed them to the win that snaps the 13-game losing streak because of the fact that he has not only 2 goals, but then gets the assist on the game winner in overtime. So he was heavily involved. And, there's going to be enough stuff where we are going to talk about within the press conference. I've mentioned multiple times in our group chat after the fact, because certainly we all had opinions on what we had just witnessed, that there is a sort of plan in place. How much of this they execute is more obviously it's up to them. I mean, I don't know their exact plans word for word here, but there is a course of action that's relatively easy to define, because you can read between the lines of stuff that's being, not just stuff that's being said, but you start to know who's safe and who's not.
Right.
I don't envision Cam Atkinson being vulnerable at any point in time moving forward. You acquired the guy because he shoots first. You acquired him as a veteran leader, and he's your leading scorer this season in terms of goals. And he's got 3 years left on his contract beyond this, but I don't think that that's a guy who you're disappointed about having to mentor anybody who is under 25.
Right. You're expecting Cam Atkinson to be fantastic in your room for any sort of and transition time we have.
And here's the thing, Joel Farabee, we talked about last week because he's hurt. He hasn't played for a little bit. But for a little while there, they were the two. If there was anybody you weren't questioning effort on, they were the two.
Their line was consistently the best line on the team.
And he still is part of one of the most consistent groups. I mean, about the only line that had a better performance specifically yesterday, if I'm going to go off of that, was honestly the Willman Frost Mayhew line.
That line was buzzing.
Because they're buzzing. And that, at the very minimum, that's something that you can deal with. You can deal with buzzing. You need to have some sort of energy.
Yeah, somebody needs to, actually want to show up to work when you've lost 11, 12, 13 straight, and they're the guys that I'm sure they were buzzing in the locker room too, keeping spirits up, playing, whatever.
The problem is for the last 4 games of said losing streak and the one that snaps it, you kind of can't have I don't know if he's actually the leading scorer, but I'm going to say it like he is because it feels like he's got a lot. You can't have Jerry Mayhew leading your team in goals.
He's got three over the last week and a half. Yeah,
3 in the last 5 games, which I might be able to find that out by now because they usually post this stuff. Is he okay? He's tied because Drew has 3.
Oh no.
But you can't have that situation. Let's be clear about that.
That's fair.
So you're in but you're in a spot, and then finally Scott Lawton's the one who scores the goal in overtime, wins the thing. But that comes after the goal with 37 seconds left by Anze Kopitar that ties the game back up. Because that's the thing. Atkinson goes down and scores. It's 3-1. There was
far too much time left.
There was far too much time left, but you're at the midpoint of the period. There was about 11 minutes left.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there looking at the way that LA has played, the way Carter Hart had played that day. Because Carter Hart here's the thing about Carter Hart during this losing streak. There's also an element, and it's a shame that I wasn't able to be there yesterday because of the fact that it's a question. They first time in like 6 weeks they went back to in-person post game at the center at least. The road games they had done a little bit of, and they made the press conference middle of the week an in-person deal, which I was not able to be there in person, so I was shut out from questions. But beside the point, I would have probably like one of the things I wanted to ask Carter yesterday was kind of, we can sit there like Mike Yale gets asked about losing streaks like this. The players get asked about what's the emotions. I think Cam Atkinson was asked about it. Like, what's the emotions like? Is it mostly relief that you just to finally win a game? And he says a little bit of everything. That's what Cam Atkinson said anyway. But I would have asked Carter more along the lines of, and Carter got asked this like more along the general terms of for the team. But I would have had to ask personally, when you've gone that long personally, like you're not playing poorly. You've had one game that kind of went off the rails, which, during the whole losing streak, which you were massively shorthanded for. So you were going to be
an AHL team.
Right. So you were going to be hung out to dry regardless. But when you're playing, like he's the one in goal on Monday. It's 1-1. You've given up one goal with 4 minutes left.
Yep, and then you give up a second, and then the third's an empty netter. Right,
so like you're in it. You're like locked into that game.
Yep.
He was. I believe he had started the game against Columbus. It's a 2-1 game. You gave up 2 goals and you didn't win. You gave up. Late. I think the Ranger game. 3-2 final, and you're leading the game with 10 minutes left. It's 2-1. You're playing well, and then 2 mistakes. And they end up in the net, and it's not your mistakes.
Right, team in front of you.
Right, like you're like that's the way that game goes. And even the Boston game before it, you're down 2-0 before you can blink, before you have a shot on goal, and you come back to tie the game, and you end up down 3-2. You play out of your freaking mind during that game.
He sure did.
I mean, but even yesterday, they took 40 shots on goal. He ends up allowing 3 goals. Which. It's not the same thing as the 1 or 2 that had kind of been going, kind of been trending a little bit. But when you give up 3,
but he very quietly puts up another stellar performance.
Right, but it's got to weigh on you personally when you have a personal losing streak that goes along with the team's losing streak, where you haven't won a game, but you're playing well enough to.
Right.
Like, is there something in your mind that goes, finally, and you can, take some relief in that. That's another piece of it,
For sure.
That's so he's been great, obviously. And
yeah, Carter Hart has definitely not been the problem. And I think we both agree that Carter Hart is one of the players that is probably untouchable, probably not going anywhere.
So I've heard mixed reviews on this because there was a lot of people sitting there going, and we might as well shift, or we're going to start.
Yeah, I think it's time to start heading towards this press conference here.
You know what? Do we really quick want to also touch on this really fast?
Oh, yeah, sure. Keith Yandle broke the record. We've been talking about it for weeks. He sucks. He should be out of the lineup. Next.
Okay, I wasn't going to just gloss over it with that, but okay.
Congratulations. It's a great effort, but on merit, you should have been scratched 80 games ago.
All right, hold on.
By a different team.
Well, hold on.
They attempted to scratch you until the locker room mutinied.
Well, all right,
why'd they try to scratch you? They scratched you as soon as the playoffs started. Sorry, I'll let you go.
No, because here's where I'm going to be at with it. He's now played technically 966 in a row, but he got to 964 on Monday night to tie it, 965 on Tuesday to break it. The thing that kind of stands out to me about it, and this is why when I was asked about it on the radio too, it was like, look, I know he's had a rough year. I'm not denying that. It's still impressive to play that many games in a row. The other part of it to me that's impressive is the fact that, he was an all-star level player.
Yes. Yes, Keith Yandle had a great NHL career.
For a streak that started 13 years ago.
Yep, absolutely.
So when you start flashing back to 13 years ago and you're going, he's playing out in Phoenix, and then he's with the Rangers, and he's an all-star level player. He was still an all-star player at the beginning of Florida. Like, to go through that many games and have some really good years in the middle of it. It's not like he was just some average guy who was
I don't take anything away from the career Keith Yandle had for a solid 10 years.
Well, and look, I'm not sitting here trying to deny the fact that this is just going to go down as a year, like this one year in particular is going to go down as one that's not great, and it doesn't have a lasting impact on the Flyers organization. Like, his career is defined by the years in Phoenix and New York more than it is anywhere
That's
else.
fair.
I mean, even Florida to an extent doesn't have the same kind of weight because you started to see like the end was nearing.
When they tried to scratch him and the players mutinied.
Either way,
All right.
Either way, because here's the thing: there's people who are going to sit there and go, "Okay, he got it. Now scratch him." They're not going to, and I'll tell you why they're not going to. It has nothing to do with his performance. They don't have bodies.
Well, and Phil Kessel.
Well, I actually don't think that has anything to do with it because I think that getting there was enough. They just gave him his moment. He played in the game. He got honored in 2 different buildings.
Right.
On the night of he gets honored, just on the road.
Right.
And then they come home on Saturday, have the little ceremony before the game starts, and he gets honored that way. And his family's there, and that's great. Like, that's the stuff that we don't see a lot of. And he's not even like let's remember here, he's not even living with his family realistically. He's living with Kevin Hayes.
Right.
Here. Like, didn't need to go and get at this point, don't need to move the family. Because this was probably like somewhere in the back of your mind,
Kids
this was always like possibly a quick stop,
right.
So that's always a possibility.
We always knew this wasn't going to be a long-term situation.
Right. Either way, it's just, don't take like they had their 2 ceremonies. Yes, they could theoretically, they've reached the point that they agreed. Like, I believe 32 Thoughts had something on this, and I'll bring that.
It was pretty heavily. It was pretty heavily implied.
It was essentially a handshake agreement when he signed
that they were going to get him the record.
As long as, and here's the thing: as long as with what's in their control. As long as
if he hits the protocol list, there's nothing they can do.
As long as you stay out of protocol, as long as you don't get hurt,
they just didn't test them. They just didn't test them.
That was I know Elliot Friedman made that joke and it was really funny. Like,
it was
that was pretty good. Either way, he gets now that he gets it. Like, they're not gonna just call somebody up or they're not gonna have somebody back soon enough that just makes this easy to change the lineup.
Right.
You know what I mean? So.
Yep. Well,
he's still gonna play. I don't know how long. I know where you're coming from with the Kessel thing because yes, Kessel's closing in. He's got the record in his sight.
He's about 20 games behind Keith Yandle and performing at a higher level than Keith Yandle is. So
and here's he'll get it eventually. Whether it's this year, I don't know. Like, it could be whenever that day comes. If he does get scratched this year, then sure, it could happen this year. But if not, if he plays through this year, it might be retirement. Because right now the clock, the competition doesn't get any closer when both guys continue to play.
Right.
He's still no matter how many times you try to swing it, he's no more than maybe 1 or 2 fewer games behind than at any point because of how much they play over another. But it all evens itself out in the end.
For sure.
That's the difference. So I don't know if it's going to work out that way. I don't know if he's going to be able to get it, if Kessel's going to get it this year. I think Yandle's got a decision to make in the offseason because I don't know that there's going to be a ton of teams out there that go, we
have to play this guy every night.
I mean, let's remember, too, he didn't sign immediately. He had been bought out. Some time went by. I don't know if that was Kevin Hayes or other people in the organization saying, hold out for a second because stuff's coming. And then when the draft was over and the weekend, the week of all those trades was over, then all of a sudden it was, here comes Yandle, here comes Brassard, and it was and because Brassard didn't sign until August, so it was late, and Yandle was earlier than that, but everything was so late last year that it wasn't like there was much time, so he wasn't an immediate. That's the thing. So I think that's something that's going to happen in the offseason is he's going to have a
probably a conversation with his family.
I think he should because I think that I don't know that the market's going to be heavy on him, even on league minimum deal. I just don't see that the market's going to be that heavy on him. As I've said before, when it comes to where this team is right now and the UFAs that they have, that's going to probably be part of the offseason plan or the trade deadline plan. Listen, if you can turn this turn this contract for Yandle into a trade somewhere for a 7th, like you did with Eric Gustafson a year ago, by all means, make it happen.
Right.
But don't expect anything, and you're probably riding out the rest of the year with him. And at that point, yeah, like it will be over after that. Like he's not coming back beyond this year. It's just I don't know if you're going to be able to get anything for him. But yeah, you at least owe it to yourself to try, I guess is the point. So either way, let's get into the bulk of let's get to the big story that we've been delaying for 30 minutes.
Yep. So real quick off the top, the big headlines from a player perspective is the news that Ryan Ellis and Sean Couturier are both fairly likely to miss the rest of the season. There's a little more uncertainty, I think, about Couturier. Kind of seems like Ellis is pretty definitely done for the year, and well, there's really not a whole lot to say about that.
All right, so I don't know how you want to take this whole thing. When I did takeaways, I went in order.
Okay.
I just started going down the rundown of what was said at the press conferences, all that type of at the press conference, all that type of stuff. And there were enough people out there who, let me start with this. Your opinions of certain people in the organization are going to be what they're going to be at this point. So if you feel a certain way about Chuck Fletcher or Dave Scott, you have an opinion already that's probably not going to change no matter what I say or anybody else says.
Right.
So if you in your head, if him coming out and having something that was semi-prepared, he didn't pull out a piece of paper to do it, but he gave a statement at the start of the thing. If I'm going to sit there and say, hey, that deserves credit, there's somebody out there who's going to come back with, don't buy that lip service. That's crazy. I'm not trying to say I'm buying everything that he says. What I'm saying is that on Monday, the press conference announcement was Chuck Fletcher's going to give his Wednesday morning at 11 o'clock. All of a sudden, there's a second microphone set up, and Dave Scott's there. That was not scheduled to happen in any way, and the guy showed up like somebody from an ownership group should when your team has just set a franchise record for losses.
Yep.
So he did what he should have done. Stepped up there. He did not sit there silently for the whole thing and
no, he did not.
And let Chuck answer questions the whole time. And I don't mean
he was not there for management oversight. He was there to participate.
He was there to participate, but to his credit, it wasn't like he was there to participate in terms of I'm going to piggyback off the questions for Chuck.
Right.
There were people straight up just asking him questions, and he's going to answer them. Yep. You don't have to like his answers. I certainly didn't in multiple situations.
No, we'll get into that.
But he was there. It was a damned if you do, damned if you don't thing, because here's the problem. You can sit there and go, the statement at the beginning is total lip service. He spoke too much, blah, blah, blah. If he doesn't show up at all, then you are upset that you have a completely silent ownership group that's just going to allow it to happen, and they make Chuck Fletcher and Mike Yeo, who speaks after every game, obviously, they're the two guys who get up in front of, who are the actors, if you will, who get up in front of the theater every night or however often, and they're the ones who do the performance while you sit up in your comfy little booth and hide away. And you're like, that's the counter to it. Either he could not say anything, he didn't have to be there at all, but then you be critical of that and say, where are you at, team? Where are you at? The team just lost 13 games in a row. Why are you sitting on your hands and not expressing the same type of frustration and anger that we have? So that was what I appreciated. His opening statement was, this isn't what anybody signed up for. I'm angry. I know you're angry.
We all know how bad this sucks.
Well,
basically.
But it was that type of stuff, and I need to go back to find the whole rest of it, too. We're sick of losing was in there. And
I can tell you I'm angry. I know our fans are more angry, and more than angry, and the whole organization's angry. We're sick of losing. We talk about this every day. We've got to figure out how to right the ship. We have a winning culture going back to Ed Snyder.
That's the important line.
Yep.
Right there, because after everything that's gone on in the last 2 months, let's call it, to bring Ed Snyder's name into that, and again, I know he's probably got some thoughts in his head as he sits down because he's going to make a statement, but you needed to acknowledge that. You couldn't just sit there and say, hey, listen, I want to make a statement. this is like, we're sick of losing. I'm angry. You make a statement that includes Ed Snyder, like, hey, this is the culture we've had going back to his time. We were known for going for it and being successful. We don't have losing streaks like this. We don't have situations.
This is not who we are.
We don't have situations where the rest of the league is laughing at us. And the other important thing that he did, which again felt genuine, honestly, he apologized. I want apologize to the fans. This isn't what anybody signed up for, and we know it. And I'm sorry.
Yep.
Like, what? Last thing I expected was an apology. Like the stuff at the beginning. Yeah, maybe the stuff at the beginning is a little bit of lip service. We're sick of losing. I'm angry. I know you're angry. All right, that's fair.
And if he nailed the fake corporate apology, great.
Sure, but that's like. Now, and I didn't write this in takeaways because to be quite honest, it wasn't worth my time to even give it, any more than what it already was. But the two things that were a little off base from the beginning was then Chuck Fletcher piggybacked off of the opening statement from Dave Scott to congratulate Keith Yandle. That could have waited until later.
Yep.
And the little nudge from Dave Scott to Chuck Fletcher about, that was a bright spot. And how about Jerry Mayhew too? Like, dude, nobody is excited about an AHL lifer scoring a couple of goals during a 13-game losing streak.
We get it. You've watched the team a couple times.
Right. Like that. Those things. That's the stuff that feels fake. That's the stuff that feels, I'm going to throw out a name just to throw out a name to make it seem like I'm still paying attention.
Right. And like,
for all I know, you watched a highlight clip of him scoring that goal 5 minutes before you stepped in front of everybody.
Right.
Like, I did not need the Jerry Mayhew mention.
I know we're comparing apples and oranges here, but Ed Snyder would know who Jerry Mayhew was, genuinely.
Yes, but see, here's the thing about those years, like the really, really good years under Ed Snyder.
Prime Ed.
He would know who Jerry Mayhew is and would be able to reference him because they'd probably be getting the most out of a player like that. Like
he'd probably be getting paid about $2.5 million too.
Well, maybe, but like here, my point being, they used to have teams that got hurt a lot, that dealt with crazy injuries, and they'd call up. I'm going to dip back into the old Phantoms here for a little bit, but they'd call up Peter White and Mark Gregg and like guys like that to try to fill the void, but to try to fill the void for a few games, and they'd still win.
Yep.
Because it didn't matter.
And Peter White would have 2 assists and be +4.
I mean, they'd have kids coming up who didn't get a ton of playing time, and like. How about the years when it's like, Stefan Ruzicka and Ryan Patolny were filling the void of injured guys, and they're doing okay. Like, that's what they used to be. So, yeah, sure, Ed Snyder was going to know who those guys were because at the end of the day, you know what you got at the end that everybody cares about? You got the W.
Yep.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think I needed the mention of an AHL lifer who's, by the way, only been with the organization for this, I believe, this season or this and last.
Right.
Either way. Like for the last year or two, and is giving you goals when nobody else is.
Because nobody else is.
And that's not a knock on Jerry Mayhew, by the way, like in terms of, do I appreciate that the guy's playing with some hustle and heart?
Some jam. Like kids playing with some jam.
He's out there trying his best for what he is, and he's making some things happen. But I didn't need to mention right off the top of the press conference.
That was very fan service lippy. For sure.
It wasn't even that, because to me it was like, if you're gonna sit there and say it was a shame that they lost the game to the Islanders in overtime, which I know it didn't happen, but if it's an overtime loss and Claude Giroux scores with 5 seconds left, yeah, I don't mind if you point out, hey, the captain's still delivering.
Yep.
Hey, did you see what Giroux did last night? That was a bright spot for a moment. It felt like it was going to find
But we don't need to shine a light on the fourth liner who's overachieving.
The worst part is he's not even a fourth liner. They got him playing third line, which
the bottom sixer.
Yeah, the bottom sixer that's why I said he's an AHL lifer. That's what it really is.
For sure.
Oh, all right. So let's jump from that portion of the press conference to the part that you just brought up, because that was the very first thing that was really asked. And in the early going, I didn't think there was anything crazy out of the ordinary. You get asked about guys like Couturier and Ellis, what's the deal, what's the injuries, all that type of stuff. You got a pretty straightforward answer, I thought. It could go
Fair,
either
yeah.
way. And by saying it could go either way, I actually I don't think it's 50-50. I think it's more towards they're not coming back than otherwise. It's just a way to cover your bases on everything. Like the irony was that I think Couturier skated with a rehab group right the day after this press conference.
Okay. Well, and if he wants to come back for a couple games at the end of the season just so he doesn't have 10 months between games or whatever it is.
I don't think that's worth it at all. I mean, the only one that I saw argued a little bit was if Ellis could come back to play maybe 10 games at the end of the year, so you see what you have with him and Provorov, kind of like an extended preseason.
Okay.
That part, because he's had such limited time. What Sean Couturier gives you.
That's fair.
There's no reason to act like you don't know what he's going to give you one way or the other and to try to do any more damage to this. I would do the same thing with Kevin Hayes. Just shut her down.
Fair enough.
The year should be over for those guys. For Ellis, I think that the choice is already going to be made. I don't think they're going to get any time with him. I think he's just going to be done too. And
I agree.
That'll be what it'll be. You know what I mean?
Yep, not a whole lot you can do about that at this point.
Yeah, that's where it starts. So that was a very basic, quick little Q&A thing and all that type of stuff, and that's the way it is. Then we get to Claude Giroux. Again, I didn't think that anything that was said was out of the ordinary.
Nothing here was surprising.
Have they had the discussion? No, they have not. Is it something that they're
thinking
coming
about?
Up on? Absolutely, It is. And I know that Fletcher's thinking about it because
he had an answer ready.
Well, but how do you not? You know what your team is. You know where you're going to be. And he knows, at this point. Giroux even knows. The key is nobody, you also deliberately, especially if you're in Chuck Fletcher's situation as a general manager, you deliberately hold this conversation off a little bit because it's January. At the time we're talking, you got 2 months until the deadline. You do not have that conversation and start to make it look like it's a given, which then takes your leverage away. You don't do it 2 months out. You do it
at this point, you're not doing it until at least after he plays his 1000th game as a Flyer. I don't mean
no, because I think behind the scenes you're doing it. You know what I mean? Behind the scenes, you're definitely approaching this subject
right. Well, and
not until March hits though.
And the most important thing. The most important thing, and Chuck Fletcher said it in his answer, is essentially that Claude Giroux holds all the cards. He has a full no-move clause. He gets to,
but
Leonidas thumbs up, thumbs down, just any trade he wants, and he gets to decide where it goes.
But this is the thing about it, because, yes, absolutely 1,000% correct. But what it also does is it kind of, I don't want to say it deflects anything here, but if nothing happens, if Claude Giroux does not get traded at the deadline for some reason, it really takes everything out of the hands of the other people.
This is Chuck Fletcher saying it's not my fault.
Kind of, in a way. Because, the point being, if Claude Giroux is still on this team on March 22nd when the deadline is over, it's because he decided to still be here for whatever reason.
Yep.
And I don't want to make it sound like he has no reasons at all. You've got family here. You literally, your kids have been born here at that point.
You've been the captain here for a decade. If you want to do the whole career as a Flyer thing, you should have the right to. We're talking about you on the franchise Mount Rushmore at this point. Claude Giroux has the right to make whichever decision he's going to choose to make. If he wants to go try to win a cup somewhere and get traded to Colorado, or any number of other teams, he should have that right. And if he wants to stay and sit in the misery with all of us, then he should have that right too.
Well, and he does, because that's what the no movement clause is for. He has no reason to one way or the other. You know what I mean? If it's his choice, it's his choice. But I think the competitor is going to come out at some point here where the realization's there. I think it's already there a little bit.
That this is his opportunity.
It's not just that it's his opportunity, though, because I don't think it's his only opportunity. He could pick any place he really wants to go at the trade deadline for the trade deadline market. And yet, that doesn't have to even be the final destination. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, he could end up somewhere completely different the following year and have a shot there.
See, that's what's weird to me. So, like, I've come to grips with the fact that we're going to trade Claude Giroux. I get that is the most likely and probably the most beneficial circumstance. But man, every scenario every scenario I visualize where they trade him somewhere, he re-signs back in the offseason. He comes back.
Yeah, I mean, you can visualize that all you want to. I can tell you they never come back.
Don't say never. Thomas Buchanan did it like 3 years ago.
For how many games?
It's okay. That's okay. He came back.
No, my point is that that's the people, those guys who re-sign and come back for like almost the 1-day contract.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
They come back to have that last moment. Like, and I think, look, I think that actually would happen. Yeah, actually I do. I think he would come back and retire here.
If he was 36, 37 at this point and they were trading him for like a Ray Bork chance to win a cup, he would come back and sign and play a couple games and retire, and that would be fine.
I don't know about that, but like, yeah, I think because I think if he won, he would just be done at that. If he was at that stage of his career, like right now he's 34, he's got time.
Absolutely.
Like, it's not like he's got no years left. And you know, I think that one of the things Chuck Fletcher said at the press conference about him is mostly correct at this point with him. He's, first of all, it's a delicate situation in the sense that you're not talking about an average player here. You're talking about a franchise icon.
The center of your franchise.
He's been around forever. He does get included in the discussion with all those other names because of the fact that that's where he ranks in a lot of categories. Games played, assists, points. Like, he's done it all with your team. Yep. So you have to acknowledge that. It's
as far as I'm concerned, the Flyers franchise Mount Rushmore is Bobby, Bernie, Ed, Claude.
I don't know. That's a tough one. There's a lot of, I mean,
Bernie stole you your 2 cups. Bobby's been in your franchise for 60 years.
You don't want to put Billy Barber up there?
If there was a 5th spot, it might go to Billy Barber. But with the 4 I got, I'm stuck.
I hate Mountain Rushmores for that reason too, because like, to me, here's the other reason I hate it. Like, I know I'm not saying that you're wrong to say Ed Snyder's part of it. I've talked about how the culture has.
If you're staying on the ice, I go at Lindros over Barber.
You see, there you go, and see, but Lindros probably belongs there. That's what I'm saying. Like, you're gonna have a time trying to figure out. But the bottom line is that the guy defines a certain era, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You have to. My thing with him is that he's going to get to a point, but whenever the trade does happen, that there's a chance. I don't want to make it a given because he missed 3 games earlier, and he doesn't miss for anything. He's missed with COVID. That's the only reason he's missed all 3
He better not miss
3-4 years. But he's like really close to teetering the line where he'll hit 1,000 games played and then probably get traded. Like, it's really close. I've already kind of laid that out there on a previous show. But he's also going to get to 900 points, and I think he's only something like I'd have to do the math in my head a little bit because he had another assist on Saturday. So I believe he's 7 or 8 away from 900. Like, he's really closing in on it. And if that's the case, I'm actually going to look it up really fast because it's worth looking up. I mean, we're only talking about the one player who's been the constant for the last whatever. He is at 893, so he is 7 away.
7 away from 900.
900.
Wow.
Now, if he gets traded at the deadline, obviously he is not reaching 1,000 here. But he's got 3 more years left after this, bare minimum, I would say. He's 34. There's no reason to think that the guy who's missed only, 5 games or 6 games in the last handful of years, all due to being in COVID protocol.
Right. The guy has been an absolute workhorse.
Right. There's no reason to believe he does not have some time left. So he'll chance it. And by the way, if he has, say, 3 years left, let's just say it's 3 after this year. Not only is he going to get 7 more points this year to get to 900 easily, because you still got close to half a season left. He'll get 7 points. He'll probably get at least 20, 25 pretty easily.
Oh, for sure.
Right? So think about it. He's going to be on track that wherever he plays down the road, wherever he gets traded to, and then wherever he goes beyond that, 1,000's on the table easily.
He's got the time.
He's going to reach 1,000 points on top of 1,000 games, on top of what else would be missing?
All it's missing is a ring.
So if he goes somewhere and wins.
If he goes somewhere and wins, Claude Giroux is a Hall of Famer, 100%.
There you go. And that's all I'm trying to say. Like, I know people think of him off the top of their head and go, nah, he's not a hockey.
He's Hall of Very Good right now.
Well, yes, but think again. If he gets a team to a cup, helps them enough.
Oh, man. He doesn't even need to be, I don't even think he needs to be like an anchor on a cup. He doesn't need to be, for example, the guy he was in the 2010 run. All he needs to do is get the ring at this point. Because when you look back after his career, you're going to look at his career and go, oh, and he also got a ring? Okay, he's in.
Right. That's the point I'm trying to make. Like,
but any of these teams, we talked about Colorado, we talked about Boston before. Minnesota is a team that's rumored to be involved. I know Elliot Friedman was talking about it the other day.
There's a few. I mean, Minnesota's probably going to be involved. I believe I've seen Calgary come up. Let's put it this way. I'll tell you who's going to be involved. Truthfully.
It's not going to be the Penguins.
No, probably not. But, like, okay. Then I'll amend the statement a little.
I don't think Chuck Fletcher's calling Ron Hextall anytime soon.
No, I agree with that. But I would say this. Here's what I would say, okay? And I'll amend the statement slightly because it's not going to be every single one of them. But if you're a playoff team or in the playoff race, specifically in the Western Conference, you're on the list of possibilities.
Oh, absolutely.
Like in terms of you probably have interest. I don't know if he has interest in you, but you have interest in him.
Giroux to Anaheim?
I'm not going to rule it out. I don't think it's as likely as other options, but I'm not going to rule it out. You know, the only team in the West that I don't think can make it work money-wise,
Vegas.
In any way, shape, exactly. Well, because you already did your work.
Yep. And Jack Eichel, by the way, is skating and looks like he'll be on the ice within the next couple of weeks.
Well, right, and there's your trade deadline acquisition.
Scary.
But and do I think he's going to go to a team that's like not quite as dominant? Like I think he's going to go to a team that really has a shot. Like I wouldn't even rule out. Like we've mentioned Boston before. I wouldn't rule. I don't think he's going to get traded within the Metro. So you can take those 4 teams out of the picture. I think. But
you know what? Here's the thing.
You're going to sit there and tell me Carolina's not crazy.
Carolina's not crazy. If you're not expecting him to re-sign there, and I don't expect Carolina to necessarily re-sign Claude Giroux, I think they're kind of not all in, but kind of as all in as they're going to be. Why? Why does that hurt you, trading them to a division rival? Like, if anything, you're taking assets from them.
I hear you. Let's.
If it's not going to be a long-term solution, you're not worried about playing him 6 times next year because he's not going to re-sign there anyway.
Well, but you don't know that right now. That's
fair.
Like here's the thing. Do you want to send him to Carolina and have him enjoy playing for Rod and then,
Here's the worst part about it. I could accept that. I'd be happy for him.
I hear you, but do you want?
I hate it, but
that's my point. Do you want him to then do that and then join, and then join in like with their super team that's to be because Aho's going to continue to get better and Svechnikov's going to keep getting better, and then they've got how many young guys who have already looked good who are going to continue to get better.
So I'm going to throw something out there, and you tell me if I'm crazy here.
Okay.
Toronto.
Not as crazy as you think, but I don't see it happening.
Tell me,
it's one of the only. No, it's one of the only other Eastern Conference teams I actually can see it like happening.
Matthews, Nylander, Giroux.
Because I can't see. Because here's what I'll
say. They have Michael Bunting on their first line right now.
I hear you. I can't. Like, here's what I'll say. I can't see it being Florida, like anywhere in Florida. I can't see it being one of these typical division rivals. It's not going to be the Rangers. It's not going to be the Penguins. Like it's probably not going to be Washington. Although Washington would be an intriguing one because he did play for Lavi.
Okay.
So I wouldn't I'm not going to sit here and say it's definite. Like I do look like there's a lot of people who think St. Louis has a case because,
if the Islanders win 9 of their next 10, look out.
I don't know about that, but okay.
I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm saying if that happens, if they rattle
Right.
off a bunch of wins and get themselves back in the playoff conversation, look out.
All right. Well, anyway, let's get back to the other stuff. I'm not worried about. Well, we have months to do
Yeah, you're right.
route destination discussions. Well, only because we're getting to like 15 minutes until the show's over. So we really want to get to the meat of this press conference and all this really crazy things that were said, the really dumb things that were said.
Yeah, let's jump right to that. I did touch on this a little bit earlier in the show. Dave Scott has mentioned an aggressive retool.
Well, I don't know about that. That was Chuck Fletcher's thought.
Oh, that was Chuck Fletcher. I'm sorry.
Dave Scott said he doesn't see it being a 3 to 5 year rebuild.
Right. But Chuck Fletcher did say they're looking to aggressively retool, and I did also want to mention the companion statement here where Dave Scott gave Chuck Fletcher his vote of confidence. Hey, Chuck's my guy.
Well, that came way later in the press conference. That's why it's way further down on my list.
To me, it feels like a companion statement because Chuck Fletcher saying that they're aggressively retooling to me kind of sounds like a guy who's looking at his job security and going, "Yep, we're definitely going to win next year."
Okay, so let me tell you a couple things about where I am with those lines, because this is my read on them anyway. Dave Scott is going to say those things, because he's going to say those things because somewhere in his mind he truly believes them. But I didn't hear it as much. First of all, I don't know how much of a vote of confidence it really is for Chuck Fletcher, if I'm being honest.
I agree.
Look, do I hear a guy whose job is safe for the rest of the year? After that, I really don't know, to be honest. I don't. I'm not sure if that's another one of those cases where I go, are we getting the whole truth here? Because I'm not I'm not sold that we're getting the whole truth. I
agree.
On one part of it. Another thing that I kind of heard was because Chuck Fletcher took that aggressively retool line and then started to say the right answer, kind of, at least to me, the right answer. And then there was backtracking involved because then Dave Scott said the thing about the 3 to 5 year rebuild. Here's where I'm at with this. He says aggressively retool. What do we know aggressively retool to be? A carbon copy of last offseason. We're gonna make hockey trades. We're gonna sign a few guys, maybe do low risk, high reward. Who knows what it is, but they're gonna try to be savvy about it. It's an aggressive retool that means get ready to see 7-8 new faces again next season. That's kind of what
big turnover.
And I look, my answer to those things is that's the Band-Aid approach. We're just going to slap a bunch of Band-Aids on this thing and hope that it doesn't. You know what it is. That, and I'm not going to say that, for sake of argument, I'm not going to say the name of the product. But do you know the infomercial with the tape that's supposed to seal water?
I know of the infomercial. Yes,
and the dude just slaps the thing on the side of something and nothing gets through, and that's what that is to me. It's we're gonna put that over the leak that's in the system here, and hope that the water doesn't penetrate and through this.
Get the whole thing dammed up immediately, perfectly.
So, okay, that's what I hear when I hear aggressively retool. That's the first problem. But Chuck Fletcher then says things along the lines of, we don't have enough high-end talent, top-end talent. He's right. We know it. We've known it for the entire year. We knew it last year. We knew it the year before that even. Even the year that they made the playoffs, get the first seed, and go 2 rounds deep in the playoffs to Game 7, we're still sitting there at the end of the year.
There's not enough high-end talent.
Well, there's not a game changer when you're down to it. When it really came down to, you need a goal.
I think that's why I was on the trade for Patrick Laine thing so hard, because he had that superstar it factor.
Okay, here's the thing. Go over the last few years, whether they had preset destinations or not, and most of them did, right? You were on the Laine train. You're on the Matt Duchene train. You're on the Artemi Panarin train. You're on every person who is out there as a scorer. You just want to score. That's it.
And I think
that's what you really want.
Yeah, sure. And I think that's a big reason why a guy you mentioned earlier, Cam Atkinson, should be pretty invulnerable to this retool. He should be here because at minimum,
vulnerable because he's shoot first guy.
Yes, at minimum, he's a shoot first guy.
The issue is that, again, they're all over the place with what they say they're looking for. They're looking for mobile players who can move the puck well, but they also are looking for physical, but they're also looking for shoot first. So turns
out they just want very good players.
Right. Like
they want Austin Matthews.
But think about here's another train that everybody was on in the offseason that the rumor was swirling, and I'm sure did it have validity to it? Because sure it did. I guarantee you it had validity because his name was out there all the time, and now it's not anymore because they're doing well enough that it doesn't have to be. But when the Vladimir Tarasenko rumors came out, you know, and that's why I'm saying I'm not discrediting the report that, it was Snow the goalie had it and Anthony Sanfilippo had it. I'm not discrediting anything about that. I believe there was validity to the fact that the team wanted a player like that.
Absolutely.
And was willing to make a trade for him. I don't doubt that for a second. What I do wonder, not wonder, but that's it's another train that you get on, right? Like it's another guy who you get behind going, oh yeah, they could use a player like that. They haven't had a player like that since. And then you really have to start thinking, who is the since? The since is it's Danny Briere, Jeff Carter, Simone Gagne. They have not had a player who goes out there and scores 30, 35, 40 goals a year. And look, they've had guys who have scored 30, but is that the complete nature of their game? No, it's not. Like I say,
Sean Couturier has had a couple of 30-goal seasons,
and so has Claude Giroux. Like Claude Giroux had a 30-goal season 3-4 years ago, but that's not the whole story of his game, and everybody knows it. And it's not what he's leaned on for. That's the other thing. If Cam Atkinson, who scored 2 goals in Saturday's game, goes out and wins the game by scoring the third and has a hat trick, you look at that point and go, what more do you say about that game for that guy other than he strapped them to his back and went out and scored the goals when they were needed?
Absolutely.
He scored the goals, not he made a play. They've got playmakers. They've had playmakers. You're looking for that guy, and that's what he's been. That's why he's got, it's why we're barely, 3 games past the halfway point, and he's got 17 goals.
Pretty good.
Like
it's on pace for that mid-30s.
Low to mid-30s, but he'll get there.
Yeah, for sure.
He'll get to 30. And that's the thing. So that's what people want to see out of it. So you cut that presents the question. How do you get the top end talent? You draft it. Where do you typically draft it?
The top 5.
Yeah. Now, I don't think this is the truth, okay? I don't think they're going to have trouble getting a top 5 pick this year.
I agree.
I think that they are going to find themselves especially when it really comes down to it. Like when the deadline
when
passes,
they start gutting the team.
And you've moved a lot of these UFA players potentially.
Yep. When Isaac Ratcliffe's playing 15, 17 minutes every night.
Well, you got 2 things. One, they're going to gut the team of guys who are probably not going to be here beyond this year. And then 2, if you do really shut down Sean Couturier, Ryan Ellis, maybe Kevin Hayes, some combination of the 3. If you shut those guys down too, then yes, you're also sitting here saying they're on the team next year, but you're stuck filling the void for the rest of this year, and you're going to be filling it with Isaac Ratcliffe and Jerry Mayhew and Max Willman and guys like that, and that's what it's going to turn into. And they're not going to score on a regular basis. They might get a few, but they're not going to score regularly.
Right.
So that's what it turns into. But so Chuck Fletcher starts saying all these things. This is how you get the top-end talent. It's usually built through the draft. He gets asked a question about, so do you bottom out? Meaning kind of tank, I guess, is the best way to phrase it, which I've said multiple times. It doesn't – there's no guarantees. It's not a surefire way to make this work.
That's true.
Right? He says the easiest way is through the draft. Historically, that's been proven year after year. Bottoming out, I don't think that's what we feel that we need to do. Believe we have good pieces. Realistically, Couturier and Ellis are going to come back at some point, or when they do, when they come back, they're a significantly better team, all that type of stuff. And all that stuff can
I don't necessarily disagree. Right.
But he sits there and goes, we need more top-end talent, and the draft is the easiest way. But we're not going to trade all 20 players on our team and try to get 15 picks this year. I don't think that's the right approach. Okay, let me pump the brakes for a minute before we move to the next portion of the comments.
Yep.
He's right. You can't just gut the team at every avenue,
because we've seen it work for the Sabres. If you bottom out, you just have nothing, and it's so impossible to come back from that.
But in my argument, because I've heard this countered multiple times. Okay, you can have a team you could sit there and take the Colorado route, the Buffalo route, whatever you want to call it, and have a bunch of years where you're not going to be very good. Does it guarantee a win? No, it doesn't. And Colorado tried this, and Colorado spent years drafting at the top and drafted names in the top 10 like Landeskog, Rantanen, McKinnon, and Makar. That is the core of their team to this day. That's the truth.
Yep.
Have they won a Stanley Cup?
No, but I think their window is wide open for the next several years.
To me, it's not even that their window is wide open for the next several years. My question was, like, my counterpoint to somebody going, like, they did it, they built it this way, but they haven't won. And my counter is, do you ever question if they're going to be in the running, though?
No.
And that's, I think, what people really want. People at the end of the day are not sitting here saying you're going to have, like,
they just want a puncher's chance.
Now, dude, for this to be a complete success, does Colorado have to win a cup? Yeah, they do.
To be fair, I think Colorado is pretty all in this year, and
I agree.
Part of the reason is Nazem Kadri's on pace for like 113 points or something ridiculous like that.
But the thing is, do they have to win at some point? Yeah, they
do. For sure.
Because you're not a success if you don't find a way to win it in that stretch time. Like if you spend 10 years drafting all these names and then don't make it,
what's the point?
Then it's a waste of an entire era.
You don't get a smaller cup for second place or third place or fourth place or wherever you top out at.
So I hear that answer, and I hear a guy who is kind of sitting here saying, in theory, I know the right way to build it. Yeah, I don't think we need to gut the whole team, which I agree with. But yeah, you kind of have to be bottom 5 to get there. And it might mean that your team, with a few guys who can make your team better, aren't going to be very good.
Right. Like, look at what the Rangers did. The Rangers did that kind of aggressive 2-3 year. They drafted Kakko and Lafreniere. They got gifted some lottery balls. And they sure look like they're turning around to be very good very quickly.
I think the translation on something like that is, no, you don't bottom out and you don't do it on purpose. But if you naturally are going to be a team like that, even with some good pieces, that is the way to do it. That's the way to build your team back up, is you're going to get high draft picks, and you do it naturally, like they are this year. Kind of this year, they're not going to win a lot of games. I mean, look, did they win a game on Saturday? Yes, they did. You know how many games they've won since mid-November? 6. like that's what I'm trying to get at. So that stuff's all well and good until you get to Dave Scott with the, I don't see it being a 3, 4, 5 year rebuild, and I'll tell you what worries me about that statement. Not that you don't see it being that way, because there might be a way to do it. There might be a way to get back into contention faster than everybody wants to believe.
Sure.
Even if it is 3 years. That's probably still faster than most people believe. Here's my problem with the statement. It tells me 1,000% over that the guy who was, like, that Chuck Fletcher's going to sit there and go, yeah, the best way to get top-end talent is through the draft, and that's, certainly a method to do, like, to I guess building it back. He didn't say that specifically, but he's kind of admitting the method to building it back up is through the draft.
Sure.
And then you got the guy to his right in the press conference who's sitting here talking about writing blank
checks.
That tells me that Chuck Fletcher is a pawn. He has zero control over what they really want to do.
Because we know what's going to happen is they're not going to sit back and build to the draft and blah, blah, blah. They're going to write blank checks.
Like, for everybody who wants to criticize, I wouldn't want Chuck Fletcher building the team, but you can believe what you want to believe about Chuck Fletcher in a lot of ways. And I know that the group chat, you'd sent over the clip from Steve Dangle's pod about how it's Chuck Fletcher everywhere he's gone. Like, look, Minnesota got good the second he left, blah, blah, blah. Like, you can sit there and do that stuff all you want to. At the end of the day, because he sits there and he goes, all he does is throw money at problems. Do you see the problem here, though? The owner next to him, or the ownership representative next to him, said, I'm going to write a blank check. What do you think he's going to do? Yeah, he's going to, like Steve's thing was loading up the money cannon and just launching it at people.
They're gonna.
The owner, the representative of your ownership group just said, here's blank checks.
You know how I knew Chuck Fletcher was a pawn? Why was Ron Hextall fired?
Because they didn't agree with Ron Hextall.
Thank you. And because Ron Hextall wouldn't let them have input on what was happening.
The only thing that I don't agree with that statement was that if all they really wanted him to do was call up the goaltender and fire the coach, I don't know why you wouldn't budge on something like that.
I imagine it was probably those were the straws that broke the camel's back. Like, I imagine that things like drafting Nolan Patrick when quote unquote, all the scouts wanted Makar or Heiskanen, whatever.
Right.
I assume that, that sort of incident was not isolated, kind of given the track record that we've had. But, I think we've talked enough about this miserable team. And Kevin, you have a birthday to celebrate, so I'm going to insist that we head towards a wrap here. And if there's any
here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna we're gonna go through the last few comments that I've got written down and make it quick, because here's where I'm at with this. That was to me that was one of the biggest takeaways. Chuck's and this is where it does go hand in hand with the Chuck's my guy comment.
Yeah,
of course Chuck's your guy, because if you told him
Chuck's a yes man.
Well, kind of. If you told him to go jump off the Walt Whitman Bridge tomorrow, he probably would do it.
Jeez.
You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. You like it because it means you hold the keys to this operation. That's what you like about it if you're Dave Scott.
Dave Scott's an executive. It'll be the Ben Franklin.
All right, so either way, here's a couple that's one of the comments I still had to touch on. So there we go. We lumped it right in. This whole Chuck's my guy thing. That's why I'm not sure. At the end of the day, what you like right now is the collaborative view of everything. And maybe that'll still be the case at the end of the year, but you realize you still have to make a change.
I mean, I didn't necessarily say I loved it. I just said that I think that's what's happening.
Either way. So this is where things really are going off the rails too in this press conference, because then attendance gets brought up. And Dave Scott tells you that COVID protocols have something to do with it, and that every team in the city is suffering in attendance.
No, they're not.
The Sixers are second in the league in the NBA
at 100.7% capacity.
100.7% of tickets sold.
Tickets sold. I'm sorry.
But here's the thing. Yeah, 100.7% of tickets sold in a building that holds 19,600. Let's just estimate.
They're selling $20,000 a night, roughly.
Paid attendance at the Flyers game on Tuesday or a Monday, and I'm not going to use Saturday because Saturday's not a good example.
Saturday was a snow game. They get a pass on it.
Saturday was a snow game where they closed down. Credit to them, actually. They closed down the entire mezzanine level, moved everybody downstairs, and gave people free hot dogs, sodas, and pretzels.
Like a friggin' high school game.
But good on them. Anyway, I think paid attendance on Monday was 14,000 something.
And that's paid attendance again.
Which is paid, which means and
9,000 in the seats.
Basically.
It was rough. It was
and there's a
rough.
Decent, one thing I hear nobody really talk about when they talk about this, and there's other like I said, one that I listen to a lot. I do check in and listen to Snow the Goalie a lot because they have a lot of good insight to provide, and I listen.
Do you listen to O&B?
Yes, I do, and I will be on there tomorrow.
Make sure to check them out. Follow Kevin on Twitter.
I was saving that for the true wrap up because
I'll throw it in there too.
But what no one's mentioning about the attendance either is that, and I said this last March, it doesn't matter if it's Flyer fans or not. Like Monday's game, there might have been 9,000 people in the building, 14,000 paid attendance, and there's a noticeable enough amount of green.
Yep.
When the Dallas Stars are in town.
For the Dallas Stars. Not the Rangers who are right up the turnpike, or the Devils, or the Capitals, or the Penguins. The Dallas Stars. But okay. However you get the building full.
So I'm gonna skip the stuff about the development thing. They put a lot of money and resources into development.
Comcast throwing money at problem. Okay.
No, this is an area that I did want to address though, because Dave Scott talks about we have to continue to communicate with our fans. He brings up Valerie Camillo, who is the business operations side of this whole deal. Chuck is the hockey ops side.
Right.
So he brings up that we're trying to do everything and more. It's another area we're investing in. My job is to provide resources for both Chuck and Valerie. That's what I'm doing. All this type of stuff. My issue with the answer is this. You have to do better communicating with your fans. Okay, that's not a false statement. People feel like the relationship's tattered. It's been severely.
Don't release a crappy mobile game.
Exactly. Don't on Monday evening, an hour and a half before puck drop.
36 hours before this press conference.
As you are about to tie a franchise record. You're at 11 games lost in a row. You're going for 12. It turns into 13 before it's finally over. And your business decision that night is, hey, check out our new video game featuring the mascot. Give me a break.
Yeah, it's
That's a read the room moment. Read the room. And you know what? Yeah, read the room. Read the room that had 8,000 people in it. Some of them rooting for the other team that's from Dallas. That doesn't even come here more than once a year.
I'm really very, very curious what the crowd's going to look like on Tuesday.
Probably not great. I mean,
probably not great.
I will sit there and do this for the rest of the year. I've done it for the last several games. I will do it for the rest of the year if I have to. I will
tweet your first period picture.
Take pictures at puck drop every time around just to show this is what it is. And like I will do it the rest of the year to show that people do not care about this hockey team.
This building is going to get empty.
So, one other footnote from the presser that I'll just touch on. I didn't even really write much of a takeaway about it, but Danny Briere's name came up. And he sounds like he's going to have
an expanded role.
After nearly getting the Montreal Canadiens GM job, it sounds like he's going to have an expanded role. Something I wanted to mention about the Comcast thing, the communicating with the fans, the whole deal with the ownership group, all that type of stuff, that I don't think was mentioned a whole lot that I do believe is a good point. And it was part of 32 Thoughts that this came up, and I didn't think about this prior. When the Flyers are good, and they are one of the teams in the NHL that draws a lot of, they draw crowds every night. The building's pretty packed, all that type of stuff.
Building's full every night when they're good.
Let's remember that not too long ago, the rankings for the value of franchises came out. And the Flyers are 6th. And that puts them behind 5 teams that were in existence long before they were. And there is even one that was in existence before they were that is behind them at this point.
Yep.
The thing is that, and Elliot Friedman said this on their show, when things are bad in Toronto, in Montreal, in Chicago, and he didn't say all those cities, but I'm throwing them out there.
You're extrapolating a little bit. Yeah.
Toronto, Montreal, Chicago, the Rangers.
Boston.
Well, in Detroit, let's just throw all of them in there because they're all in the top 10.
Yep.
We know this. The league, meaning Gary Bettman, Bill Daly, they're usually kind of wondering what's going on. Like, hey, what's going on? Because they rely on it. The revenue sharing that goes on around the league leans on the teams that are the most valuable, the teams that they know are good for a certain amount.
If you need to know more about that, you can ask Brad Marchand on Twitter.
But if the Flyers, who rank 6th in value and are usually packing the building pretty well, stay at the top of the league in attendance, things like that, certainly there's an element to the revenue sharing. But and the reason I want to say this is because I hadn't thought about this way, because my answer to all this type of stuff is, you're like, by people saying they're not going, you've stopped lining the pockets of Comcast a little bit, right? Like, you're hitting.
That's what we talked about.
You're hitting them where it hurts. The building has 8,000 people in it, 9,000 people in it. That's a problem to them. But it's going to also be a problem. I didn't think about that part, where it's going to be a problem to the league too, that goes, hey, you know what? When revenue sharing, with the way revenue sharing is, when revenue is good from teams they can bank on it from, that's what makes the salary cap go up. And that's what makes the amount of escrow in between stay lower, because the league is making money and they can, the players don't have to pay that back. Usually, like right now, there's still a recovery in process because of all the things for the last couple of years. But there's no restrictions here, realistically. Like, you can't make the statement like we just talked about, the whole COVID statement where, oh yeah, vaccinations in the city and all that stuff and the policy and all that. It's not stopping people from going to Sixers games. So it's it would not stop people from going to Flyers games.
Not a valid excuse.
Right. So you can stop, you know, like you can just stop. So that's why I hated that answer. It's why I think that the idea that they don't think they need to rebuild this thing is a little bit delusional. It's a little delusional also to kind of hear the blank check. I'm writing the blank checks and a guy who's basically sitting here saying, I'm the one holding the keys. I'm the one in the driver's seat. I'm the one who's signing off on all these decisions. He's just, you see that guy who's over here who actually has the label general manager? He's not really the one who's making these calls. Like,
he's a pawn.
But if it were up to him, he would do it a certain way, and it's not up to him. Just like at the end, the way Ron Hextall wanted to build it was probably not really up to him at the end.
Ding, 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 ding.
That's what I'm trying to get at. I don't believe that. Like, we make it out that Ron Hextall, it was his way or the highway. That's why he got fired. And I believe that to an extent because he probably fought back. That's what it is. He fought back and said, no, we got to keep building it. Patience.
This isn't the right way to do things.
No, and in fairness, fans were kind of tired of that too. They did want to see steps forward. But the problem is that what happens when you force the steps forward? You sign James Van Riemsdyk to a $7 million contract. You sign a Kevin Hayes, to $7 million a year when you shouldn't have needed a guy to overstep what Nolan Patrick was supposed to become because he's not there yet and he's not developing the way that you hoped, right?
I think here's the problem. I think the fans got tired of Hextall because management told them to, essentially, because Dave Scott's message hasn't changed. They've always been retool. We're a year or two away. We're 2 years away. We're 2 years away. Remember a couple years ago when the Rangers decided that they were, blowing it up and they were going to essentially start over? They wrote the letter and their fans went, all right, sure. We agree that we think this is what's best for the team, and we're down to be, not great for 2 years because we know we're going to come out better on the other side. Okay,
and the problem with the New York Rangers in this case is hitting the lottery on multiple occasions.
Well, sure, and Adam Fox decides, he doesn't want to play for anybody but you. Jacob Trouba decides he doesn't want to play for anybody but you. Artemi Panarin decides he doesn't want to play for anybody but you. You win the literal lottery with Kakko and Lafreniere. I understand. Right. I understand.
And to the point where the only guys who they really have that sustain this whole thing are Kreider and Zibanejad. Right. That's about it. Hold on. And then through your other drafting, oh, by the way, you've got your successor to Henrik Lundqvist of all people.
Right.
You just dropped
and the other guy who's also good enough to do it and probably is going to lose the job because he's just not quite as elite as the first guy.
Right. You've got a good tandem of young guys you developed. Not to mention, did they draft other guys outside of Kakko and Lafreniere? Yeah, they did. Keandre Miller is on your blue line. You made a nice trade, a good trade at the time, to get Ryan Lindgren because he was not your prospect. You acquired him, but you saw something and you go, "That's the guy I need to trade this guy." That was I think the Rick Nash deal to Boston. Okay. So Boston sends back Ryan Lindgren. You get a good prospect out of that. Your forward group, even down to. They've taken pieces who people think are part of their core. They traded Pavel Buchnevich last offseason as if it was not a big deal. We can move on from that guy and we won't miss a beat. We just need to get we need something different. And what do? Barclay Goodrow, Ryan Reeves, guys like this. We need size, more physical, tougher. and it works. They're gonna be right there at the top.
Yep. But what I'm saying is if the organization had supported Hextall and thrown itself behind his kind of idea, I think the fans would have gone along with it a lot better and Hextall would have gotten a lot more rope.
The problem also is that, when the Rangers put that letter out, how long did they envision it going?
I think they pictured 3 or 4 years and it ended up being but one bad season and one medium season. Right,
but what was Ron Hextall's tenure? It was 4 years, and
that's fair.
So when your message is, we're gonna build. Now Ron Hextall had to tear down certain parts to start the build. So I'll give him a year pass there, and then he was in the middle of his 4th season when everything really went down.
That's fair. I think you saw some good things, and I think the team that ended up being, one of the better teams in hockey during the 70-game shutdown season.
Let's remember the
was a Hextall team.
Well, and let's remember the comments from Bobby Clark too regarding Hextall, because I think the alumni also kind of had a little bit of an issue with the way Ron Hextall was doing things, even as an alum himself.
I think it's all intertwined.
Well, that's why it doesn't go anywhere. You know what I mean?
Right. That's fair.
What's different about the Flyers right now that wasn't the same in 2010, let's say? And I'm not talking about 2010 performance on the ice was better because
Chris Pronger high.
Well, no, but you were in the Stanley Cup final. I'm not trying to deny that, but what I'm saying is that what's different? The owner really holds the keys to what happens. He's signing off on big things, and what's your typical goal? Go get the big fish, right? So going into 2010, it's go get Chris Pronger.
Yep.
After the fact, or 2 years down the line,
go get Ilya Bryzgalov.
Go get Bryzgalov. We need a goalie. Go get Bryzgalov. Trade 2 cornerstones of the franchise potentially to do it.
Yep.
Right. So trade. So go get Bryzgalov. So nothing's changed in that regard. Where ownership still wants it's go.
Trade JVR for Luke Shen. Do it.
Right. Stuff like that. but what else has changed about like the alumni still has a big impact on everything. That hasn't changed, and they do still make some decisions around. Do the old timers still agree with it? Don't
Everyone listening to this show knows my opinions on that. So
no, but my point is that does it go anywhere? Does it ever go anywhere? If those things are still the same, if the root of your franchise and organization is the owner has the keys to making the key decisions, whoever it may be, and the history of the franchise is still heavily influential on today's game, which it can't be. Like, there's nothing wrong with respecting the history.
Sure.
I think it needs to be done, and I think that's actually a thing that's disappeared too much in the last few years. You're distancing yourself from the history because of the fact that you're trying to, I mentioned this before, it's the gimmicks. That's what it's going to take to get today's crowd in here, and there's a lot of people out there that don't buy it.
Right.
But what you're also seeing is that there's still too much of that input. It's still too much of who's the former guy. And listen, guess what? It's going to happen again because we just said his name. Danny Briere is going to get a significant role. Now, here's the thing. You can look at Danny Briere and say, oh, here we go again, another former Flyer. Or you can be a little different about it and say it's not Bobby Clark and Paul Holmgren being recycled.
It's a new generation.
Here's a guy who's come up with today's game, knows today's player, played in the game recently enough that they communicate with today's player. He can be an effective management person because he's been molded to today's game in a management role, not the other way around. You can't take a guy like Paul Holmgren or Bobby Clark, not that I think that they necessarily would, but you can't take that guy and say, come back and be the president of hockey operations over top of a general manager because it's too old school. Now you're going too old school.
Yep.
So that's the crossroads you're at. You got an owner who is taking right after the predecessor, the founder of the team, who is willing to throw any money you can at it within reason because you're stuck with a salary cap, which has always hurt this team.
Yep.
It always has.
Absolutely.
As soon as they put the salary cap in, the Flyers lost a competitive edge because they couldn't just write blank checks for everybody. That's how that's the truth. But on top of it, you're trying to bridge the gap with these guys. Like, you're trying to figure out a way to still communicate with today's player to figure out what makes you a good destination for people who want to make you a competitor. Like, that's why I'm worried about the bottom out thing. Like, you think you're going to aggressively retool. You think you're going to make some good hockey trades. You think you're going to sign a few guys potentially. That's the plan. Like,
you're signing Johnny Gaudreau.
Well, I don't know if you're signing Johnny Gaudreau. That's my point. Like, here's my point. Your intention is, truthfully, and I'll reference 32 Thoughts again on this because they mentioned a specific name that I haven't said yet that I want to get to. Here's kind of what your plan is. First of all, the obvious part of the plan is if you're going to sell, you're going to sell every unrestricted free agent you've got. He's going if Giroux is gone, then you're also shopping. And Rasmus Ristolainen is kind of a 50-50.
He's the only one who's 50-50. Yep.
He is the only one, but I don't even know if he should be. Like, I think you need to even, chalk it up as a bad deal.
I agree. I think you ship him out.
And get what you can back. So you do that. Look at everybody else. Derek Brassard, Justin Braun, Keith Yandle, Martin Jones. Even if they're not great, just see if you can get anything.
Can you get a fifth for him?
Right.
Done.
That's why with Yandle, I said, do what you did with Gustafsson last year. Get a seventh.
Take a conditional seventh.
I would take it either way. You have those guys. James Van Riemsdyk is a buyout waiting to happen. I feel like everybody knows that. So that's probably going to happen. Then you have the kind of key question marks because, Dave Scott's not the guy who should be talking about it, but Dave Scott talked about the core, right? And he mentions 4 injured players at the moment: Sean Couturier, Kevin Hayes, Ryan Ellis, and Joel Farabee. Joel Farabee, I'll give you 1,000% over. And I think it was honest mistake that Carter Hart was not mentioned. By the way. I don't believe that. But I don't think it was a mistake that Travis Konechny, Travis Sanheim, and Ivan Provorov were not.
I agree.
I think that those guys are
targets to be
potentially
moved.
Up for grabs.
Yeah.
And that's the give us a call, we'll talk, and if something really works out, I think Provorov's the least likely of those 3 to move. I think Konechny is on the move, and I think that Sanheim is a tougher one, but I think if you're going to move a defenseman, you're going to consider moving Sanheim. And then with all of that in mind, the buyout of JVR and all the contracts you moved and all the guys who aren't back, and if you trade a Konechny, let's say, with no salary retained.
Right.
Then you're you're going from what I think lines up now is about $14 million in cap space to something like 20.
That's a lot of space.
So then you're going to enter the free agent market with substantial money.
Yep.
And that's where the blank check comment comes in. And
Yep.
you might look, you could try to throw money at Johnny Gaudreau and say, come play in Philly. And another name that that Elliot Friedman brought up that was an interesting one, he brought up Nazem Kadri.
That's a very interesting
and
name.
basically said, to an extent, this is the type of guy where if he gets to market, he's a flyer. Like, that's pretty definitive to say without having a guy hit the market.
Elliot Friedman does not say things that definitively very often, and he said it pretty. Listen to the clip.
But I will tell you this, by the way. I looked at that free agency list. It's not outstanding by any stretch. It's got a few nice names on it, but I think you're going to be trying to really orchestrate some key hockey trades here to try to, if you really want to just aggressively retool and not rebuild. But Nazem Kadri was a name that did stand out a little bit, not because of what he's doing production-wise, but just because of the fact that if you're looking for guys who give you points and you're looking for guys who play with an edge,
it doesn't get much better than Nazem Kadri.
And you lack center depth, which you do.
Yep.
That sounds like a guy I'd be targeting.
Yep.
So
I certainly see that.
So at the very least, I look at that and I go, there's something there.
Yeah.
I can see that. It makes sense. So that's I think where we'll leave this one is that you've got, a lot of things to consider. I don't
definitely a lot of options.
I think that there was this is how I wrote it. I think there were elements of denial. I think there were elements of making a lot of excuses. They mentioned injuries multiple times. I don't want to hear about injuries anymore. Every team in the league has injuries. The Pittsburgh Penguins had 8 guys out of their lineup at one point in time for one reason or another, whether COVID or otherwise, and still won games and still stayed afloat at 500 until they got everybody back. And now they're a force that can't be moved, right? Like, I mean, down to the point where I think they lost back-to-back games over the weekend, and it's like a shock to the hockey community. Like, they lost – oh, my God, they lost to Seattle and Detroit in overtime in a shootout. So they still got points out of it, but it didn't matter. What are we going to do? And there's other teams that are way better, obviously. So
absolutely.
I thought that there were elements of it that were delusional as well, which to me, delusional being the same old with the owner holding the keys to – the thought that you think that this can be a less than a 3 to 5 year rebuild. I don't see it. Like, I don't see you doing anything differently than, what the era was before you got an Eric Lindros, which was a few years of it being pretty rough until Eric Lindros came in a lockout shortened year. Like, he didn't come in at that time. He was a rookie before then, but until all of a sudden in a lockout shortened year, that guy turned the league on its head and made it clear his presence as an elite in the game was going to take that team somewhere. And then that year they made a conference final, and 2 years later they were in the Stanley Cup final. So there you go. And every year after that for a while, they were heavily in contention.
Yep.
That's what you've got to get back to. And I don't know that they do it in the near future. That's the thing.
We've talked before about the Flyers kind of heading towards the top of the draft, and as we get closer to the end of the season, I imagine they're going to keep losing. Like we talked about a couple times, there's only one game this week, so there's only so much damage you can do, but we will be back next week to talk about it. And
I think we can talk more about this type of stuff too next week because we'll have even more time. Like this week, 3 games. The fact that they snapped the losing streak kind of changed the tune a little bit. So
I imagine we'll be talking about this next week as well.
Yeah, I agree. And because it'll evolve, there'll be more, and it feels like every day there'll be more stuff.
This is an ongoing story. This is one of those seasons where the Flyers are just going to be in the news all season.
Well, because the last, and you brought it up with the communication thing, the game, the mobile game was the next thing in the line of the off-ice things that I've talked about all season.
Yep.
So that's where we leave it for now. But
that's where we leave it.
So again, next week we'll be on, and Monday I'm recording with OMB. So
yep. And a quick programming note while we're going through the schedule here. We are going to take that following week off Super Bowl Sunday. This is kind of the Olympic break, so we had a break planned in here. And quite frankly, we both need a break from this team, and Super Bowl Sunday seems like a pretty good time to do it.
Did I mention how much after yesterday that I'm looking forward to the fact that I think there's what they play 4 games in the next 2 weeks?
Something like that. It'll be nice to have a little bit of a break. It's 5 over the next 3 weeks. Something like that.
It was like the COVID break. when that happened over the holidays. It was like, oh, that's nice right over the holidays.
But all right, we're on our way out of here. Make sure you're following the show on Twitter at YWT Podcast. Follow Kevin at Kevin_Durso. We're on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Podbean, iTunes, Google Podcasts, SportsTalkPhilly.com. We're all over the place. Make sure to follow at SportsTalkPHL and at Flyerdelphia for all your Flyers updates. And until next week, I don't really think we have much left. Happy birthday, Kevin. See ya.
Thank you. See ya.